But it's going to have a massive effect. Last year there was $54 billion of deal values in the MENA region. So as you can see, adding 70 billion to that, we're already massively skewing the data from last year. Most of that last year was also in the energy sector, and this deal is adjacent in chemicals. So it'll also skew the shift in terms of the sector breakdown of deals. Even without the SABIC deal, we're already at over 20 billion worth of deals this year, and it's not even March yet. So as you can imagine, 90 billion by the end, well, already is almost double what was last year. Yeah, well, if you look at the SABIC deal, that's behind the regional shift towards the downstream segment in the energy companies. So if you look at ADNOC, for instance, they've done a number of very large deals, selling down concessions offshore and also selling stakes in their midstream business in order to refocus on the downstream. It's largely driven by, I want to diversify away from upstream oil, where the sensitivity in prices is, as anyone knows from seeing the oil price drop from 2014, is very capricious. So you want to integrate further down the value chain. And so that's what's trying to be done, as well as a shift towards Asia and towards bringing in foreign investors into the region. So yeah, it's really interesting kind of deal flow at the minute in that regards. Yeah, well, like I say, technology, the Uber Careem deal is really interesting. It's another deal that shows the importance of the tech sector in M&A. That's across the board globally. The interesting thing is obviously having someone invest into the region, and that's indicative of wider inbound investment into the Middle East, whether it's in technology or consumer or in chemicals or in power utilities. As mentioned before, the ADNOC deal, that was really interesting on the midstream. We had KKR and BlackRock invest into their pipeline business. That was the first time that, or maybe not the first time, but the first significant investment by infrastructure funds into the region, which is interesting because that shows that these investors are widening their mandate and seeing that the region is less risky. So therefore they're able to come in and that could be a real boost to deals going forward. And like you say, other sectors like consumer, retail, technology, I think as the general interest in the region grows, those sectors will see more M&A, especially from inbound investors. And like I said, power utilities as well. In Oman, for instance, you've got ongoing privatizations of its electricity transmission and distribution businesses. And there's already large European strategics in that country that, so there's likely to be foreign investors in that space as well. I would hope so, yeah. I think that will continue to a certain extent. I think it's very hard to look at the Middle East or MENA in a wider sense and give a general trend, because every country is different. But in terms of the GCC countries, I think that is very much probably likely to continue. Well, it's curious. I think it does two things. It shifts the equity story. So away from upstream E&P towards a more integrated model and downstream and to petrochemicals, which is very important in terms of the valuation of the company. So since 2016, when the IPO was first mooted, questions have constantly been around the valuation, hitting that 2 trillion number, and whether the reserves in the ground justify that number. Now, already this year they have come out with some reserves numbers, which is great. But what the SABIC deal does, it makes them less important to a certain extent, because it makes the business more agnostic in a way. It's across the value chain. It's not just about what's in the ground in Saudi Arabia. However, what it does do is, in terms of the timeline, it could affect that. Yeah. So they've already said they wish to IPO in 2021. Now, it depends how long this deal takes to complete. Now, deals take a long time, but obviously this is 2 state-owned companies, so maybe that will speed up completion of the SABIC deal. Either way, though, it could add extra time before they can do the IPO, because they will need to show the results of the acquisition, and they'll need to show reports, audited financial reports with that acquisition included, 6 to 9 months potentially of reports post completion. So yeah, it's hard to say exactly, but it will certainly have an effect, and it's all part of their growth towards a story that makes Saudi Aramco more palatable and more investable to foreign investors.